Have you ever tried to do the impossible? I bet you have. You're probably here in the midst of doing something impossible. That hill you're about to climb, full of the unexpected, full of challenges. What gets me through all of this is knowing I can overcome anything. I will adapt. I will overcome. That's my mantra. There's something inside me that knows I can overcome any odds. Most founders are probably not much different, right? You're faced with the impossible task, and you have to figure out a way to get it done. If you're anything like me, you've probably been faced with impossible tasks your entire life. I want to share a story with you. When I was 11 years old, we went on a family vacation. We went to Jamaica. I was excited, not because of the gorgeous beaches and crystal blue water. I was excited because I was going to get to drink real coconut water. See, we don't get real coconut water like you do in Brazil. So when I got to Jamaica, I was excited. I had to find that coconut. And I found one. Victory. I took that coconut to my parents, and I presented it to them with pride, and I asked them to open it for me. They wouldn't open it for me. They wouldn't even give me a knife either. I guess the idea of a hard coconut, an 11-year-old, and a sharp knife wasn't the best idea. But that's the way my folks are. They won't stop me from doing things, but they also won't do everything for me either. You could say I'm a little bit hard-headed, a bit like that coconut, because I carried that coconut with me for 3 days. I would slam it against the ground, I would stomp on it, until finally, on that third day, I looked down and I smiled, because I knew I had a chance. And I picked up a brick, raised it over my head, and with the force of Thor, crack, opened that coconut, and I could now enjoy the delicious, warm coconut water at that point. But you know what? Coconut water never tasted so good. Now, there's something more happening here. This isn't about coconut water. This is about being faced with the most impossible task and figuring out a way to get it done. Because when you get knocked down again, you get up again. I've always been that way. I've always been determined, and when someone says you can't do something, you figure out, you say, what's next? When someone says it can't be done, you get it done. Now, fast forward to me selling my company, Viva Real. Maybe you've heard of it. How could I make this decision to sell this thing that I'd put my blood, sweat, and tears into, put my heart and soul into? Here I was thinking about selling this company. I'd given birth to this thing. And it was a time when I had an opportunity to kind of think about more what's my purpose? What's my meaning? And it brought me to this interesting concept. It's called Ikigai. Now, Ikigai is kind of a reason for being or your purpose. And, I would only revisit that concept a little bit later. But when I was a kid, I did have a purpose. I will crack open that coconut. And that's exactly what I did. Now, when I was a kid, I ended up having a little business. Many of you as entrepreneurs have your own businesses starting out as a little kid. And I taught swim lessons to the neighborhood kids around, where I lived. And it actually went pretty well. I ended up, one summer, this is in high school, I ended up having 60 students one summer. And remember my best week, I made $1,500 in 1 week. Now, that's before my parents took 15% off the top, my first lesson in operating costs. And I loved helping these kids. It felt really fulfilling. It was motivating to see them progress. But above all, what I really treasured was the freedom that I got from the things that I could buy from making the money in building this little business. And I don't think that my experience is unique in that way. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You pursue your passion for your purpose. It's your why. It's your reason for doing things. And I think every good founder has passion and purpose. You have it. You may not know you have it, but you have it. And the reality is that purpose can be different. It doesn't have to be something that defines your entire life. It can be something that's temporary or eternal, but the key thing is you have to have it. For some founders, maybe it's something crazy like transforming society. For other founders, maybe it's just building something that people want. But for me, my purpose starts with a rather predictable reason: to be closer to a girl. Okay, that's not the entire story, but I'll get there in a second. When I graduated college, I knew I wanted to start a business. I grew up in an entrepreneurial household. My dad had a business, and I saw the ups and downs of his journey, some of the struggles, some of the victories, but I knew it was what I wanted for myself in my future. But I didn't want to rush it. And so I knew that there was two things that I wanted to do. First, I wanted to travel a lot. And second, I wanted to reunite with my college girlfriend who I'd met in San Diego, and she'd gone back to her hometown of Bogota, Colombia. So I got in my car, I convinced a buddy, and I hopped in my car, the Burro Blanco, that was our affectionate name for this car, and we crossed the border in Texas, down through Mexico, and we were on an epic adventure. It was an incredible, exciting time. And eventually, I would get to Costa Rica, and something would happen. Something would change. My purpose would adapt. Instead of just wanting to travel, I decided I wanted to be closer to Andrea at this point. So I sold the Burro Blanco, and I bought a one-way ticket to Bogota, Colombia. Now, when I got to Colombia, my pockets were feeling pretty light, kind of close to empty. And I needed a place to stay, right? Move to a new place. And I'm a gringo, right? So I'm in Latin America, and I'm like, okay, there's got to be a place. There's got to be something like, kind of like maybe a Motel 6 or something, right? Motel 6, if you haven't been to the U.S., it's kind of like McDonald's for short-term housing. So I went and I found a motel. To my surprise, motel's something different in Colombia, in Brazil, and I wouldn't actually realize that until later that night when I went out with my wife's family. Very elegant evening. We had a wonderful dinner. We went to the theater. I had to borrow clothes because I didn't have anything nice. And they asked me, hey, can we drop you off wherever you're staying? And, I accepted the invitation. And it wasn't until we pulled up and I saw the look on their faces. Something is wrong here. So I had to figure out of that situation and change my predicament. So I ended up needing to go house hunting. So I went to start searching for an apartment. Now we have this word in English that I really love. It's a word called serendipity. I don't know if anyone here knows this word, serendipity. I can't think of a great translation in Spanish or Portuguese. But it's kind of like this, it just happens. It's not really a thing. It's this chance encounter that you have. And, I like to think about it in the following way. If you're, maybe you're looking for your keys and you reach in your pants pocket to see if your keys are in there, and then you find a big stack of money. That's serendipity. But the difference between luck and serendipity, you have to choose to adapt. For serendipity to matter, you have to make that decision to choose to adapt. And when you adapt, something changes. That change can be something big, or the change can be something small. But you change and you adapt. So, reflecting a little on that motel experience, which made me cringe for many years after when I think about it, it resulted in this kind of unusual moment of serendipity that would really change the trajectory of my life. Something as simple as the act of trying to find an apartment. So I'll take you back to 2005. When you were looking for a place to stay in 2005, you pretty much had one option, which was the newspaper in the classified section. So that's what I did. I contacted a real estate agent and I scheduled a meeting at a cafe. And in that meeting, you know, the agent was reassuring me, oh, I've got the perfect property for you. You're gonna love it. And I said, great, let's see. He pulls out a list of 15 properties and says, the property you're looking for, it's on this list. I said, great, let's go check them out. The agent kind of went like this to me, kind of wagged his finger. No. That's gonna be 20,000 pesos. I'm like, what? Wait, let me get this right. You want me to pay you to have access to information? That seems pretty unfair, and actually kind of made me grumpy, to be honest. But then I was like, oh, that motel situation. Okay, take my 20, and let me check out these properties. And that's what I did. I went and I visited these properties. First property, already rented. Second property, too expensive. Third property, not available. Wasted an entire day, paid money, lost money, came away empty-handed. And you know what? It wasn't a total waste, because this moment led me to a moment of serendipity. I thought to myself, you know what? There has to be a better way. I visualized this central repository of all the property listings in the country. You know, something that I had suffered as a consumer was now shifting to my purpose. So again, about that purpose, you've got to choose to adapt. It changes you, but you need to choose to adapt. But there's a catch to that. Sometimes, as we know as entrepreneurs in this room, sometimes you've got to just survive, right? That's the truth. How do you see the next day? Now, even though I wanted to solve this problem, the reality is I need some money to live. I'm in a foreign country. I don't have any source of income. So I did the only thing that I could do at the time, which was I became an English teacher. I had no way. No one would hire me for anything. I didn't have a business degree. I didn't have anything. And when I decided to do that, I realized, okay, I need clients. So imagine there's this gringo, 24 years old. I'm walking the streets of Bogota, Colombia, trying to find clients to teach English to. Pretty hard. I remember walking on the main avenue up into this kind of big high-rise building. And I looked up at the building and I said, you know what? I'm going to go in this building. I'm going to get in this building. So I ended up slipping by security and stopped at the first floor. Not interested. Third floor. Rejected. Fourth floor. Who let you in here? Finally got to the 16th floor, and by coincidence, I ran into the director of human resources at this stock brokerage. And guess what? Turns out they were looking for an English teacher. I landed my first contract, and crisis averted. I had enough money to stay in Bogota another year. And that led me to another interesting encounter, a chance encounter, in a very, very strange place. You're all here today. Maybe you're building a company. Maybe you're meeting a co-founder. This is a good place to meet a co-founder. It turns out the place where I met my co-founder was in immigration, paying a fine for overstaying my visa. So how did that happen? You're probably asking yourself. So I'm in line at immigration, and I saw this guy. He had a German passport, And I had remembered from my classes that there was an executive at the stockbrokers that wanted to learn German. So I struck up a conversation with this guy, Thomas Florax, and turns out that he was looking for some money, and he also had an interest in technology. He had experienced building websites at the time, and we ended up having a great conversation and hit it off. Now, everything was about to change, but I'm learning something really, really important here. I'm learning that you have to adapt and overcome. See, serendipity, it's that chance encounter, but it's not enough. You have to do something with that chance encounter. That's when you have to choose to adapt. It's when you realize you can do something, that you should do something. So Thomas and I got together and we discussed some different ideas, and we knew we wanted to do something, build a company. So we were building websites, we were doing all kinds of stuff until we realized that there was an interesting opportunity. And that opportunity was we were going to sell bilingual websites to real estate agents in the US. So we did that, and the business actually did pretty well. By 2007, we had over $50,000 in recurring revenue, and we'd hit profitability, and we were starting to feel pretty good about the potential of the business. And then 2008 happened. You may remember what happened in 2008, the global financial crisis. And the thing about that, my world was rocked because we were in real estate, and it obviously devastated. $7 trillion of wealth just disappeared. And our customer base was even more affected. The US Latino market in the US was even hit harder. So again, we had to overcome, but more than overcome, we had to adapt. And what we realized is that our customers, what they needed was they needed customers of their own. And so we adapted and we thought, you know what, we're gonna build a marketplace of properties. So going back to that same pain that I had, I couldn't find a property. Let's solve that for these people. And so we did that, and we wanted to go down that route, but we had the cold start problem. I don't know if any of you have had the cold start problem. How do you get the network effects going in your business? It's hard. And we went to real estate brokers and we said, hey, put your properties on our website. And they were like, why would I do that? You don't have anyone searching for properties on your website. We couldn't get consumers to visit the site because there were no properties. So it's a classic chicken and egg problem. So what do? We adapt and overcome. And the thing about this is, day in and day out, you have to truly believe what you're doing matters to someone. You could be doing it for yourself. You could be doing it for your family. You could be doing it for your community. But you've got to keep going on. Now, the US market was in crisis, right? And so we started looking for other opportunities in other countries. And I was in Colombia, started looking, seeing other opportunities. And I remember sitting in my apartment in Bogota, Colombia, and I pulled up Google, and it was the moment that I realized just how big Brazil was, because I typed in apartamentos à venda in São Paulo, apartamentos à venda no Rio. And then I started looking, and I saw there were thousands of people searching for these key phrases. And I started Googling, how big is Brazil? Like, how big are these? And wow. What happened is when I clicked on the links to these websites, that was when there was an aha moment, because they were flash websites, didn't have any property information, totally just broken websites. And so serendipity strikes again for the win. I get an inbound message from Diego Simon. This is when he enters the picture, and he reaches out to me and said, hey, Brian, we studied together in Argentina in 2001, and I'm just reconnecting. And I remember, I actually look back at these LinkedIn messages. He's literally connecting after years, and my first thing it says, we're building a business in Brazil. First thing I write. And so after a few exchanges, Thomas and I, we decided to invite Diego. Come on up, Diego. and come to Bogota, and he slept on Thomas's couch, and we worked a ton, translated the website into Portuguese, came with a game plan, and with a handshake, we gave him $20,000 and said, let's launch the operation in Brazil. Now, when I say the operation, it's basically Diego in his little home office. This is before a home office was actually a thing. And his mission was, I got to get brokers to list on our website. And so, again, we had that problem. How do we convince these brokers? We faced a lot of rejection. And so we came up with a plan. And that plan was, Brian, you're going to call these brokers. You don't speak any Portuguese, hardly at all. You're going to call these brokers. He wrote me a script. He said, when they say this, you say this. When they say this, you say this. So here I am. Oi, gostaria de falar com o dono da imobiliária. And by some miracle, it worked. We got directly connected. Maybe they thought that I was like a big buyer or something of a big property. But they would, João, tem cara ligando, quer falar com você. Pass me to the owner of the broker. And I would schedule a meeting for Diego to go visit the broker, and we would offer these customers a free trial. Now, 6 months later, we went back to see if this free trial, did it work? We didn't even have visibility. We didn't even know if we generated any value for these customers. So we just were kind of praying that when we got there, and we had to put on kind of a poker face. So Diego went in, and he was like, it was great. You guys got a lot of value, right? We want to renew you, and we want to charge for it now. And I remember I was waiting that moment for him to call me after the first couple of meetings. And at the end of the day, he calls me and he says, Brian, we closed 2 contracts today, 10,000 reais. And I remember that moment with extreme clarity. This might be something. That was our day one. It was the moment I realized we might have a viable business. Now, we realized that the Brazil market was pretty big, and we decided to go AAB, all about Brazil. I could feel the excitement. You know, we're thinking, you know what, this is going to be big. It's going to happen. And we just needed to find a little capital, right? Easy, 2008, 2009, easy, find some capital. And by another stroke of luck, I ended up landing a meeting with the former CEO of a property portal in Australia. This was a $1 billion company, and I landed this meeting with this guy by the name of Simon Baker. And we met up in a cafe in San Francisco, and you know, he had his notepad, he was taking notes diligently for an hour, and at the end of the conversation, he said, okay, Brian, so how much are you raising and what's the valuation? And I remember kind of took a big gulp, tried to project confidence. And I was like, Simon, we're raising $1 million at a $5 million valuation. Ukata looks at me, looks back, looks at me again, slams the notepad shut and says, yeah, this meeting is over. We're in one of the worst financial crises of the last couple decades, and this is a bit delusional. Tough medicine to swallow. So what I did next is a little embarrassing, but it happens. I waited. First of all, I beat myself up for like an hour. Then I got on my cell phone and I call Simon. And I'm like, he doesn't pick up, right? We just had a meeting and he just stormed out. I leave him a message. I'm like, hey, Simon, how about $4 million valuation? Would you take that? Such a rookie at this whole fundraising game. So what did we do? We did the logical thing, right? I took the only asset that I had, a physical apartment, and I sold the apartment and I put all the money into the business. Now, I'm still married at this point, and I'm still married today, so. But my wife was not exactly enthusiastic about the idea of selling our only asset and putting it into a business. You can imagine that conversation. We moved to São Paulo, and for the first month, We slept on Diego's living room in his little apartment, a one-bedroom apartment. And it's wild to think about this, but, and I remember my wife is smiling in this picture. She wasn't smiling most of the time during that time because we're sharing an apartment. And I'll add a little spice to the topic here. We've been trying to get pregnant for 2 years, right? It's pretty hard to do in a one-bedroom apartment you're sharing with your co-founder and his wife. Let me tell you. We had to get creative. But in all seriousness, there was a really, and the next kind of thing I'm going to share, it's very personal, but it was probably the hardest moment if I think of my journey. If I think about this whole journey of the last 15, 20 years, and it was the moment when my wife, who's very tough, I like to describe her as she's an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove. That's how I describe her. So she's pretty tough. But I remember she kind of made eye contact with me, and I was like, oh shit, she wants to talk to me right now. You guys know what I'm talking about. And at that moment, she says, hey, we need to have a chat. There was no privacy. So we walked down into the lobby of the apartment, and it was one of those kind of torrential rains in Sao Paulo, when the rain just pours all of a sudden. And I remember looking out, and there was just a river of water in the streets. And it was like plastic bags floating down the street. And she looked at me and she said, ¿Qué diablos estamos haciendo acá? What are we doing here? Why don't we go back to Bogota or California? And I remember it was one of those moments where I just looked at her, and I just told her, I said, you have to trust me. Like, we're going to get through this. And she kind of wiped her tears away, and she didn't have to say anything. And we walked upstairs again. And a few months later, things weren't really looking any better. We were running out of money, and I decided to give Simon Baker a call again after all this. And this time, the dynamics were a little bit different when I spoke to Simon. It was, instead of him giving us $1 million, he was now charging us $5,000 to be a consultant. So, definitely flipped. So, we hired him, and a week before his arrival, I kind of panicked because I'm like, how the hell are we going to pay this guy? We don't have any money. So we organized an event. It took us 1 week. We threw it together. We invited all of the real estate brokers in the city. Simon came, and he was our international speaker. And we charged for the event, and we had a couple sponsors. We lined this up all in 1 week. And we walked away from this with, one, Simon being extremely impressed. First time in Brazil. He's now been back many times. And we ended up closing a ton of customers because of this event. And I remember, Simon was so impressed, and it wouldn't be till several months later that he would actually save our company. There's a theme here, running out of money. So in 2011, we are running on fumes. I hadn't paid myself a salary in 6 months. And I remember we had $87 in the bank. We had 25 people on payroll. And 2 days before the end of the month, in July, I remember I was physically sick from the stress of it all. I was clicking update on the bank account every 10 seconds. Simon wires $300,000, and we were able to make payroll that month. And it's really a full circle moment for me to be up here with you because, at Latitude and Vamos Latam and my personal journey, I really want to help all of you adapt and overcome. The following years after that would be insane roller coaster. We would buy companies, expand nationally, and we built a pretty big business. We became a group. But things were never perfect. A lot of times, you may have heard me say, your best day and your worst day, sometimes that's actually the same day. I remember at that time, I was nominated Entrepreneur of the Year in 2014. And so everything on the outside looked like it was going amazing, and we were killing it, as they say. But the reality is, we had tons of struggles. And I remember, every day was a new battle, and was I enjoying the moment? Not so much. So around that time, it became very clear that other people also had struggles, and it was really comforting when I met other founders, and I started opening up about some of my struggles, and we connected. I had suffered with a couple panic attacks, and I felt like it was taboo, and then, a couple friends from Endeavor that I'd met had gone through something similar. We exchanged some experiences, and we kind of support each other. And it was the moment I realized that how vital it is to have a supportive community of fellow entrepreneurs. One of the reasons why we're gathered here. And so I wasn't alone, and it was the first time I got the taste of what the power of the entrepreneurship community. And we actually organized something that we called the Breakfast Club. And the Breakfast Club was a gathering of 5 entrepreneurs. This is, over 10 years ago. And, David Velas from Nubank. It was early in the Nubank journey. Thomas from Dr. Consulta, if he's here today. Big shout out to Tomas, good friend and excellent entrepreneur. Also an Endeavor entrepreneur. Daniel from Pitsy, another Endeavor entrepreneur. And then my friend Kimball Thomas from Jinda. And we would get together, and it was an environment where we could share openly about some of the frictions we had, some of the struggles we were going through. We exchanged ideas on stock options and all these practical things that we had experienced. And it really fueled me with all this energy. And I got involved with Endeavor. Love to see the Endeavor crew here. Shout out to Endeavor. I just love you guys. You guys are amazing. And I just wanted to help every founder. That was my motivation. It felt so good to be helped and then to help other people. And so there's one thing that's a constant that you're going to face. It's the constant in startup land. Change is going to happen. The big question is, will you adapt? Will you overcome? March 4th, 2020, I signed the deal to sell my company. If we had waited an extra week, it probably would have been derailed by the COVID pandemic. And when I had that time, I had an opportunity to really think, to really reflect, and to start thinking more about what I wanted. I knew I wanted to help founders. That was something very clear because I felt the connection. And I wanted to focus more on impact. So I adapted yet again, and I revisited this concept called Ikigai. Now, Ikigai is a Japanese phrase, and it combines what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at. So I thought, what do I love? What can I do to help the world? What can I be paid for? And what am I good at? And what I realized that a lot of things kept coming back to this wanting to support other founders. And my purpose in my community, in our community, it became very clear. I'd remembered all those moments. I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. Edit that out for my kids. No idea what I was doing. But I just saw the importance of the mutual support and the community. And I had learned so many mistakes along the way, from making the wrong corporate structure, to screwing up the fundraising process, to just every single mistake that I'd made along the way. And so in April 2020, I kind of made a proclamation to anyone that I knew. I said, look, if you're an early stage founder, if you're building a company in Latin America, I want to help. I want to support you. I want to hear what you're going through. I want to be there for you. And my plan was to help a little bit. A little bit turned into a lot, and I took 150 Zoom calls over a few months. And one thing that I really became very clear, there's two things that I recognized in these conversations. One, the caliber of entrepreneurs is amazing in Latin America. So much more impressive than my vintage when I started. But at the same time, there was some fundamental barriers and gaps that existed. And so there was so much potential, but there was an opportunity to really help other founders. And so, I started really thinking about how my experience can help elevate the next generation of startups in Latin America. And what I saw is that they needed more than just advice. So there's a handful of things we'll talk about today a little bit more. Some software. I hated certain things. I won't tell the story of me selling my company and we paid $100 million in taxes, but pretty big pain. And I had all these experiences of all these things that I hated to do, opening up a bank account, dealing with tax and compliance, like all these things that take you away from focusing on your customers when you should be obsessing about them. You're dealing with so much bullshit as a founder. And that really frustrated me. But it became very clear in these conversations. So these are the seeds of Latitude. Latitude decided to focus on it because of my ikigai, to help fellow founders that are here. And I'm super proud to be doing this with Yuri Danilchenko and Gina Gotthilf, who you heard earlier from, and just incredible partners in this mission that we share together. And, I look around and I'm just like, look at this community that we're building, We've accomplished a lot together. And so I wanted to do more for a community that's already done so much for me. 5,000 people showed up to this event, which is wild to think. Because when I succeed, you succeed. When you succeed, we succeed. That's what a community does. That's why I'm standing here with you today. With you, because of you, for you. I'm for you because we are Vamos Latam. Vamos Latam.